You're listening to the Speaking Tongues podcast. I'm your host, El Charisse. Each week, I sit down to a conversation with multilinguals where we discuss and celebrate language, life, and culture through our own perspectives. Episode 45, Speaking Italian. Hello, language lovers. Thank you for joining me for this episode of Speaking Tongues, the podcast in conversation with multilinguals. My guest today is Gloria, an Italian teacher and founder of SpeakIta. In this episode, Gloria and I talk about having patience when learning another language, and she tells me a strategy that she used to help her learn English while living in the UK. We talk about mindfulness not as a practice, but as an attitude that one can apply to learning another language, and we discuss the issue of spontaneity and the trouble you can run into when you try to anticipate what someone will say in a conversation, something I definitely struggle with. But one very important point of discussion that we make is about confidence and finding confidence when speaking a new language and how mentality can be so important on your language journey. You'll hear us talk about some popular things in Italian culture, including the all-important language of the Italian hand gesture. Thank you to Gloria for having this conversation with me and sharing your story with all of us, and for such an insightful conversation. As always, if you enjoy this episode, don't forget to rate and review the Speaking Tongues podcast on Apple Podcasts so that other language lovers like ourselves can find the show. Okay, let's chat. Ciao Gloria.
Ciao.
Come stai?
Bene, grazie. Tu?
Bene, anche bene. Thank you so much for joining me to talk about your language. And I like to start each episode with the same question, and that is, what is your first language and how many languages do you speak?
So my first language is Italian, as we spoke at the beginning, right? And I also speak English and Spanish because I'm living in Spain right now, and also French, although it's been ages since I last spoke French, but it's in my database of languages.
And what languages did you hear spoken in your home or in your community when you were growing up?
Only Italian, to be honest, and a little bit of dialect when I was with my grandmother. She would speak some dialect from time to time with her friends, and I would pick up some words and phrases.
Oh, cool. Which dialect?
It's a dialect from Pavia, which is a town close to Milan, so 30-40 minutes from Milan.
Mm-hmm.
So I picked up a few phrases in that dialect, but I honestly cannot speak dialect.
Do you notice that dialect, if it's popular now, if a lot of people still speak in that dialect?
Not really. People tend to mix it when they speak Italian among each other. It depends on where you go. There are areas where dialect is more popular, I would say. So you can maybe basically hear a whole conversation in dialect, but where I come from, people would normally speak with their northern accent and squeezing in some expressions in dialect to make the conversation more colorful.
Yeah. I'm so fascinated with dialects in Italy. I think it's just like such a, like you said, colorful addition to the culture and to the languages that people speak in Italy. Tell me what your language learning experience was like when you were in school. Were there any languages that you had to take, or any that you elected to learn?
Well, I began with English when I was 7. We used to begin at 7. I don't know why now things have changed. But when I was a child, we began at 7 years old, and it was only English for me at that time as an option. But when it came to middle school, because we have elementary, middle, and high school before we enter university. So when it came to choosing what to study during middle school, I knew that I wanted to include French and not only English. It was too limited for me. I wanted to know more. So I began at 11 years old to study French. Mm. And then on my third year of my high school, I began Spanish.
Oh.
Yeah. I was so obsessed with languages. I think I didn't choose psychology as a degree just because I would have studied only English, and it wasn't enough for me. Mm-hmm. So I gave up on psychology and I went to study modern languages.
Yeah.
But it wasn't until I first went to the UK, which was my first trip abroad, that I actually began to speak English. First, it was only grammar and tests and exercises and textbooks. So very little space was given to speaking. Mm. And when I was 13, I first went to the UK in a tiny little village in the south of England. And I had no choice. No one would understand me if I spoke Italian, so I had to use English. Yeah. And this is where I started to, first of all, realize that I had to practice speaking a little bit more. And that I could use what I had and be a bit more patient and wait for the words to combine as I began my speaking practice. Mm-hmm. It was a bit of a strange experience because I was used to believing that I knew English because I had good grades, but grammar and speaking are two different words.
That's a really interesting perspective. And I'm glad that you said that, because I think when you're in school and you're studying a language, it's not like any other subject that one can study. And when you don't have the opportunity to have conversations and to speak, you kind of have a false hope or a false perspective on your abilities within the language. And like, what was that experience like? Like, what did it feel like for you when you had to go to the UK and you had that realization that, oh, uh, just because I got good grades doesn't mean that I can carry a conversation.
Well, it was a bit disappointing at first, to be honest. But then I think I chose to be patient. I don't remember the exact feelings that I had when I went there, but well, I sort of expected things to be different because I was told that people speak a bit faster than I am normally used to. Well, I had an initial moment. I was younger, so less inhibitions also. Right. But I chose to be patient, and I had a few moments of moments where I couldn't understand anything, and when I felt like a fish out of water, and if I can say that, I felt totally dumb. But I gave myself time, mm-hmm. and I was supposed to stay there for 2 weeks. And when I allowed myself to give myself time and patience, also to first to understand and absorb what people were saying to me, and then to produce what I had absorbed, I began to see differences after 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. And I remember that I was beginning to write my to-do list in English. Mm. And I began to think in English also. Yeah. Because my life was entirely in English. If I had to ask for directions, there was no other option. I needed to buy a postcard. I had to speak in English. Mm-hmm. So when you have no choice, then you go and look for what you already know, or you have to start with a dictionary. There's nothing wrong with that. And then you try. Yeah. And maybe you make a mistake. It doesn't matter. You have a clue for the next time that you try. So that was my approach when I first went to England.
So that, I think that is incredibly mindful of you. to do that. And I think that I can speak for myself. I won't say a lot of people, but like I know when I've been in situations like that where I've had to communicate, I've completely shut down. But
Mm-mm.
I like that you were able to figure out a way to pay attention to where you were in the moment and work with what you had in the moment. Um, I think that's so valuable.
That really helped me. But now that you mention your experience, I had a similar one when I went to Spain.
Hmm.
So my approach is not always the perfect one, and I do make mistakes when it comes to dealing with my learning. Uh, I went to Spain when I was particularly stressed out. It wasn't the most relaxing period of my life. So I wanted to get everything done and understand absolutely everything by yesterday and not today.
Mm.
So that didn't really help me. And because I was so frustrated, I kept uh, blaming myself for not understanding, for not being able to speak in a clear way. And so I put myself into a negative loop,
Mm.
to say it briefly. And it was only after a few months that I realized that I had to be a bit more patient with myself. And if I didn't understand, uh, there's there's nothing wrong with saying, "Hey, I don't understand. Can you repeat?"
Right.
And my worry was that I would frustrate other people. But at a certain point, I said, "Hey, I need to be able to be in a situation where I can understand because I am the one who's learning.
Mm.
So if I get mad at me, not my fault. Sorry."
Right.
Mm.
That's a really good um, attitude to have, I think.
It took me time, but I'm glad I
It
I
takes,
developed that.
yeah, and I think also too, I when you were in the UK, like you said, you were younger and you didn't have as many inhibitions, but in when you were in Spain, were you older at that point?
I was I was 30.
Yeah, so by that time we're like, "Oh god," like I think we have so many other things that we're worried about that factor into our
Mm,
frustrations, right?
yeah.
Yeah,
And the moment and the things that you have to do, like when I first went to the UK, I had nothing to do but attend a course.
right.
And when I moved to London, and then when I moved to Spain, I had paperwork. I had to find a flat.
Mm.
I had to open a bank account, and I need to be able to communicate with people who had no other options but using the local language. So there's a stress factor playing a big role.
Of course.
The hard part is being kind to ourselves when things don't go as expected.
When did you first decide to start teaching Italian?
When I was completing my master's degree, I
Mm.
had to choose a working experience among other options that I had. So I could attend a workshop maybe, or take a language certification, or maybe do a work experience. And I chose to do a work experience, and I began teaching Italian to children in elementary and middle school that we have here in Italy.
Mm.
I fell in love with the job, and then I decided to get certified. And it was 2012, and still doing it. So I guess I picked the right path, and because I fell in love with the profession, and I don't want to leave it.
And what do you think is about the Italian language? So you fell in love with teaching
Mm.
Italian. Do you have are your students children now or are they adults?
No, they're adults,
Oh, okay.
and mostly they come from the US because they have relatives in Italy or from Italy. They have Italian origins, or they fell in love with the country.
Yeah, very common.
Mm.
A lot of people here have Italian heritage and connections to Italy. And we all love Italy, by the way. We all Love Italy. But tell me about the Italian language. What are some things that are special to you about the language? And what do you think people should know about Italian before they begin to make the effort to learn?
Well, you asked me what's special about it. I think every language is something special. I don't know if I can answer this question, because what's special to me might be not special to someone else, and someone might find special what I don't find special. But I like the how descriptive it can be, and how words change based on the suffix that you add to them.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you say for example that you want to you pick the word fratello, brother.
Mm-hmm.
You want to say little brother, it's fratellino.
Mm-hmm.
Big brother is fratellone. I don't know why, but I'm so obsessed with it. I love it.
I never knew that.
Yeah.
No, like fratellino, I know, but fratellone, I don't think I've ever heard that.
Yeah, kids say that. Oh, fratellone. Well, not nowadays, but it used to be a common word when I was young. Fratellone, fratellino, or casetta to say a little house,
Mm-hmm.
which is super cute, by the way. If you say casetta to me, I'm imagining a tiny little house in the woods, cute, with flowers.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, these altered words come with a picture, if I can say that, so you can immediately imagine what the other person is talking about.
Yeah.
And what people should know about Italian before making the effort is, in my opinion, like in every language, don't expect that it's going to be exactly like your first language, especially if they have two different origins. Languages have not only they have a different structure, first of all, a different grammar. They might share similarities, but grammar is different. But most importantly, what I love about languages is that they have a different way of looking at reality.
Mm.
So in my opinion, someone should expect to find a language which is completely different from their first language, and also be prepared to embrace a new way to see the world and be enriched by that vision.
Yeah. I really like that. And I think that from my perspective, I think the reason why a lot of people, I would say particularly Americans, like I think what Americans love about the Italian language is that it's so easy to get an understanding of what Italian culture is like through the language. And I think that, like I said, we all love Italian culture because we from what we see or from people who visited, it's just like so beautiful, and you can really feel that beauty like through the language, I think.
Mm.
Which is not to say you can't through other languages, but I think that I think that there's just, for me, it's just something that, I don't know, it's just all tied together. Like you can just feel, I don't know, I'm not saying it right. I know I'm not saying it right, but um I think, and you tell me what you think, but I think that for English speakers, I think that Italian is really easy to learn, because I think that it's easy for us to pronounce because there's not a lot of complicated sounds in Italian, and the words are pretty much written as they're said, right?
That's it.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's easy or hard for an English speaking person to learn. It depends on how used you are to a certain sound. But yes, it's a great advantage because what you read, you say, and there are specific pronunciation rules. It's not like English. English is left like to uncertainty. you see a word. Well, this was my experience. I saw a word. I thought that I had to pronounce it in one way, and it turned out to be exactly the opposite. So, but Italian has got this point on its side that what you read, you say.
Yeah. Yeah. And for me, when I was learning Italian, that was a huge advantage, um, because, I started learning when I was 19, I think, and I was prepared for it to be like Spanish because I had studied Spanish previously, and I was prepared for a lot of complicated sounds, and it was a breeze. I mean, so and I don't mean to make it sound like, anyone can do it, but for me, it was very easy, and I really fell in love with Italian language so quickly. We got along very well from the start, I think. I know that in your teaching, you include mindfulness.
Mhm.
Tell me how the practice of mindfulness has helped you, um, in your teaching, and how it's helped you to learn other languages.
So when I talk about mindfulness, it's not necessarily a practice. I practice mindfulness and I love it,
Mhm.
but it's more of an attitude rather than a a practice, an official practice.
Mhm.
When I speak about mindfulness, I mean being mindful, being present to what is going on. And this applies to all the areas. Like when you are reading a text, we are often mindless. We don't reflect, we don't think about what we are reading. But when you're reading a text in another language, then you can begin to make connections and have light bulb moments and see, hey, this is how the sentence is built. Wow,
Mhm.
when you pay attention to that. This is one example. And also when you listen to someone, I used to do that exercise. I sound like a stalker, but I would close my eyes and listen to other people talking.
Yeah.
And instead of thinking, oh dear, I don't understand anything, I try just to stay there and enjoy the moment, because if I pay attention to what my head is saying, then I'm not able to enjoy that moment and see what's actually happening. There are happening things around me.
Mhm.
And so if I shifted my mind to, oh my God, I should have been able to understand this and this and that, I was missing on a lot of things.
Yeah.
So this is one practice, if you want to call it practice, that I invite my students to do when they do some listening practice or listening training. Stay there. Maybe close your eyes if you feel like closing your eyes, and bring your attention to what's surrounding you. What you're thinking in that moment is not important. What's important is what's happening.
Mhm.
And then you can make the most out of your listening experience. And more often than not, you realize that you can pick up more than you thought.
Mm.
And boom, you had a reward, you had some more motivation. And when you have a conversation with someone, again, the head goes and takes out thoughts that we don't need in that moment. But if we bring our attention to the moment, and most importantly to the person we're talking to, without expecting them to say something that we think they might say, then we have a more fluid conversation, if I can use that adjective,
Yeah.
or we have a more spontaneous interaction, and we are able to retrieve the words that we know and use them in that moment, instead of maybe thinking in advance, oh, maybe I should say that. If they say this, I can reply like that. That is not what is helping us carrying out a smooth conversation.
Mhm.
This is why I talk about mindfulness. You
Yeah.
don't need to do the practice if you don't want to. It's just, in my opinion, when it comes to language learning and speaking other languages, it's a matter of an attitude, a
Mhm.
willingness to stay in the moment and be open and be calm.
Mhm.
Because when you're calm, when you don't focus too much on the result, then you're able to retrieve what you know.
Right.
and combine it, which is a winning strategy.
I'm really glad that you mentioned that because that's something that I struggle with and I don't always know how to explain it, but just like talking to someone and trying to anticipate what they're going to say and then trying to form what I'm going to say in return, it really takes me out of my head and it makes me more anxious and it makes me feel like less confident in what I know I can say and what I know I can contribute to a conversation. And I guess I often feel like I'm very much alone in that, but I guess that's very common that
Mm-hmm.
people do that. And I think it's
Yeah.
helpful. Yeah, it's helpful to, what you said um to recognize it, to have someone call it out as an issue. Because I think that you tell me, I mean, I think people do it and they don't always realize that they do it.
Yeah, I know. I did it and I didn't know, but I was doing it.
Yeah. I just remembered I had an old coworker who was he was from Rome, and he would try to help me to, he would try to help me. This was like ages ago, and he would try to help me to speak Italian. And I remember he looked at me once and he said, "You have to stop. You have to respond quicker," because he's like, "I know what you're doing. You are translating from English into Italian in your head before you speak.
Mm.
And that's not how you're going to learn. You have to just say what you need to say in Italian." And I was terrified, Gloria. I was like,
I bet.
it was terrifying, not only because he was a native speaker, but it's like, I didn't even realize that this was what I was doing. I was just doing it unconsciously, and it was really holding me back.
Yeah, I can relate to that. First of all, speaking from my experience, I knew that I didn't know, right?
Mhm.
So my confidence was not that high in that moment. And then, especially if you live in another country, you want to impress the native speakers and you want them to say, "Oh my God, you speak so perfectly."
Right.
But that might not happen. And it's okay. I mean, we are learning. We cannot always be perfect, if there's such a thing as perfect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then the more you mentioned translating, but the more time we spend translating things from our first language to our target language, the more we can get inaccurate, if I can say that, because not every translation can work.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
And we are not professional translators, we are speakers.
Yeah.
And again, as I mentioned before, languages give you different ways of looking at reality. So it's hard to do it, but it's on the long run, it's more winning to embrace this new way and make it yours and use it as an advantage because you have another tool to experience the world.
Yeah, that's true too. I think that I hope that people who don't speak more than one language, I hope that they become inspired to learn another language when they realize that the ways that you can express yourself change so much when you have um, when you have access to new vocabulary. And it's to me, it's so rewarding. Um, and it's made me more appreciative of my own first language. And it's changed the way that I express myself in English um, through
Totally.
being exposed to other languages. And I think I think anybody can have that experience, really.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I always give it the overwhelmed example. I've learned how to say I'm overwhelmed when I went to England because it was quite a common adjective that I heard back then. I don't know why. Probably it was the London effect. Uh, and you have a translation for overwhelmed in Italian, but it's not the same image that I have when I say that I'm overwhelmed. You can say sopraffatto, quite a mouthful, but the image that I have in my mind when I say sopraffatto is not the same image that I have when I say overwhelmed. Mm-hmm. So you see now, same word, literal translation, but a totally different vision.
What do you envision when you hear sopraffatto?
Someone who's suffocated by tasks, by time passing by. But when I think of overwhelmed, I think of someone's surrounded by things and not suffocating. I don't have this planted image of someone who's going crazy. Mm-hmm. When I'm overwhelmed, I have too many things around me. This is what I envision. Well, if I say that I'm sopraffatta, I feel almost like if I were suffocating. But it's my mental image.
That's an excellent point. I mean, I can think of, well, not off the top of my head, but I'm sure there are words that, we say in the US that are used in the UK, and, it's the same, it means something completely different, like when I hear it than when, if someone from the UK would hear it or say it. So, it makes sense that that mental picture really goes a long way, I think, too. I would love to talk about confidence. I know you mentioned to me before that you work with many introverted and shy people. How do you feel that confidence plays a role in language learning and the success that one can have with learning a language?
Plays a big role. But first of all, I would like to point out introversion is not necessarily related to confidence. I think I'm more of an introverted person. Mm-hmm. I'm not someone looking for chaos, but I do love talking to people, but sometimes I prefer to stay on my own. But that is not necessarily connected to my confidence. Mm-hmm. What is connected to my level of confidence is my high sensitivity, because I get affected by many more things that than someone who's not that highly sensitive. So it's crucial for me to work on my confidence. And to go back to your question, being confident when you're learning a language is, can I say, fundamental?
Yeah.
I'm not saying that if you're not, that you're automatically hopeless, but you can work on your confidence, of course, as you go. Mm-hmm. Because it helps you recognize what you do well instead of what you did not do well. Mm-hmm. And it's so easy to focus on our mistakes instead of on our progresses. It's so easy, and we are wired to do that because we go to school and we see red marks on our papers. So when we make mistakes as adults, well, we do the same.
Yeah.
But when you know that you have resources and you know what your resources are, and you know that you are making progress, you are getting results, and most importantly, you become aware of what you can do with what you have, boom, you go everywhere. Mm-hmm. And it's not just a matter of knowing that you can break the word, if I can translate an Italian expression. You don't have to break the word or eat the word, mm-hmm. But it's also a matter of mixing this feeling of knowing what you can do and knowing that you can do it with the feeling of it's not a big deal if I make a mistake. I can learn from it, mm-hmm. Right? This is why I insist a lot on reframing the situation, which,
Right.
by the way, has been proven effective in psychology as well.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of insulting yourself and blaming yourself because you made a mistake, try and shift your mindset and say, what can I learn from that? Or after a conversation, most people are tempted to say, I was a disaster.
Mm-hmm.
But what if you begin to say, what did I learn from that? Okay, maybe it didn't go as expected. It can happen, okay? But what did you learn from that? What can you work on before you approach someone the next time? And confidence gives you also the strength to look at your so-called weaknesses or parts to be filled, and build them up. Because at a certain point, we have to realize that we have to work on what we don't know. Otherwise, we cannot reach true mastery.
Yeah.
If we want to reach it. And also, confidence gives you that strength to look at your. I don't have to use weaknesses, but I have no other word at the moment to describe them.
Mm-hmm.
Confidence gives you the strength to look at your weaknesses and work on them,
Right.
face them, and also celebrate yourself for working on them, because we need it.
Mm-hmm. I think that I never made the correlation between confidence and uh learning a language before, really before this year, to be honest. Um and I mentioned before we started recording that, you know, for me, I've struggled for so many years to just get to a point of feeling like I can effectively communicate in another language, like consistently, you know? And it wasn't really until this year that I started talking to more people and doing this show and um really understanding that my issue is confidence, because it's not like, you can know all the vocabulary in the world, you can know all the ways of saying certain things in the world, but if you don't feel like you can express yourself freely, it can be uh, it hinders your progress,
Mm-hmm.
I think. I think I'm saying all this because I didn't realize how much it was a mental, I don't want to say game, but it's really about your mental state. And I think it's really about understanding where you are mentally that will allow you to um to go forward and to make progress in learning a language.
Yeah.
So that's the point where I am in my in my personal language journey. Um just trying to come to terms with that and understand it. And I think, I ask you that question also because I'm trying to understand it. I'm trying to understand like what it does to people and how people are able to get past uh the insecurities and not feeling confident and not feeling capable. Um so that's really why I was curious to know what your thoughts were on that.
Great question, because I'm a master procrastinator. I well, but I need to practice what I preach, so this is why I'm here. you know, Insecurities tend to block us most of the time, and when we feel that we are blocked and we are freezing, we don't take action. What's really useful to me, what I'm finding extremely useful, is to, first of all, when I decide that I want to do something, I shift the verb from I have to I want, and this is a first good starting point. Then I set a deadline. I want to do this by 4 p.m., 5 p.m., whatever. And because my mind, well, not just my mind, the mind goes, the mind distracts you, right? When we feel insecure about doing something, that something makes us feel uncomfortable. And we want that feeling of gratification and comfortableness. The brain wants that.
Right.
So I try to think of how will I feel after doing it, and how will I feel if I don't do it. And that's a vicious circle, a positive one. I had a couple of good results today. I had to finish a couple of tasks, and of course, procrastination hit me as usual. But I said by 12:30 I have to complete this, and by 3:30 I have to complete this. I began the task. My mind began to distract me immediately. But then, hey, how would you feel if you complete this task by that time? You can reply to the text message later, but if you reply now, how will you feel if you don't complete that task? So I talked myself into the task, and then I was able to conclude that. And then if someone is particularly stressed out before facing a conversation, what I teach is stay with those feelings. Stay stressed out. Don't push the feelings away, because this is another principle of mindfulness, by the way. Stay with your feelings, embrace them, and feel them in your body. And even if you are tense, scared, panicking, well, in a reasonable way, of course, speak anyway. You have to do something badly before you can do it, before you can do it well.
Right.
The first attempts will not be as you want them to be. And we all need to make peace with it. Myself first. Because I want everything to be perfect. No. But this is not how reality works.
Yeah. Oh, man. We're discovering a lot in this conversation today. So this is a good time for me to ask you, tell me about SpeakIta. Tell me about your students. Tell me, you talked a bit about your methods. If there's any other method that you didn't mention, tell me about it. But tell me about your students. What are some of the reasons that they have for wanting to learn the Italian language? And how do you notice that the practice of mindfulness has helped them to learn Italian?
Well, my students come mostly from the US or English-speaking countries, and they have a connection with Italy. Either they fell in love with the country, or they have relatives, grandparents, or ancestors coming from Italy. Maybe they have an Italian surname or an Italian full name, but they live in the US because, migration. And I noticed that among my students, that they're all incredibly intelligent, and if I say amazing, it's too general, but I got a bit emotional, so I cannot find another adjective at the moment. And they're so determined to get better. But I see that confidence plays a big role in their learning. I've seen a lot of people struggling with their confidence and struggling with speaking, despite the fact that they knew a lot. They knew really, really, really a lot. They have a good baggage and a strong base, by the way. My strategy, my method of including mindfulness and inviting them to accept feelings and act with them or despite them, depending on how you want to see it. It's helping them take the words out, which is ultimately something that we all want to do when we spend so much time with textbooks. I have a Telegram group for the members of my community, and I send them a weekly speaking challenge.
Oh, cool.
And then I send a general feedback for everybody. And the most common feedback that I gave was, don't read, because I gave them time to think about what I want to say, and then record either an audio or a video. And I found myself saying most of the time, don't read, be spontaneous, you're in a safe space, then nothing is going to happen to you.
Mm-hmm.
I keep it informal because, having an informal environment helps you speak more freely.
Yeah.
And so it's a way to help people unleash themselves and unleash their Italian.
Yeah. Do you have many students who have maybe tried learning in a more, I want to say, traditional, formal classroom sort of way, and maybe they didn't have success with that, and now they've found you, they're working with you, and your method is helping them to break through in a different way?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there are people who try the traditional methods, or translation, or written production.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to take into account that grammar, translation, or written production are only parts of what a language is.
Right.
We need to train all the skills, and I don't want to sound banal, but we have to practice and not just open grammar books and go over grammar, over grammar, over grammar.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, it's useful to know how grammar works. But this is part of a traditional method that I was taught with. And I know from my personal experience as a student and my experience as a teacher that just grammar is not going to help you speak.
Yeah.
So yeah, I remember one woman saying, "Oh my God, after all these years, I'm finally seeing results."
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't surprised that she said that, not because she was working with me, but because she's so incredibly talented, intelligent, and curious and interested.
Mm-hmm.
That was no surprise that she was seeing results. She just needed a different method.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And I think it's wonderful. And I think that I'm glad that now there's so much emphasis on people learning languages in ways that don't look like they did when we were kids in school. Because a lot of people do have trauma around that, and they do have feelings of inadequacy around, like you said before, getting bad marks on an exam, or having a teacher who was particularly difficult, or hard on them. So I think, like, a method like yours is really powerful, and I'm sure that you are helping a lot of people achieve their goals. For anyone who's listening, let us know where we can find you and get in touch.
I have a website. It's called SpeakIta, SpeakIta.com. And then on Facebook and Instagram as SpeakIta Italian Lightheartedly. And on LinkedIn as well. I'm publishing posts on LinkedIn. You can find my full name. It's Gloria Spagnoli. And that's it. That's pretty much it. LinkedIn, Facebook, and website, and Instagram.
Great. I will add that information to the show notes for anybody who wants to just click 1, 2, 3 and get in touch with you right away.
Thank you.
I want to talk about Italian culture, if that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Italian culture is really popular everywhere you go in some form or another. What are some things that you would want people to know about Italy that they may not be aware of?
Gestures. It sounds banal, really, but gestures, I think, they are underestimated
Really?
by many. And what people don't realize is that it's not just a colorful way of expressing emotions, it's a language. You can really you can avoid speaking, but if you give me the right gesture, I will understand absolutely everything of what you want to say to me. So they can come with spoken words, but alone they're enough to get your message through.
That's really amazing. Gestures change from region to region, or are they known universally throughout the country?
They're known universally. What changes from region to region are maybe nuances, words, dialects, of course, and expressions.
Yeah.
But gestures are more, let's say, international.
I love it. And I can think of a few gestures. I mean, the ones that I was told about when I was living in Italy were like the rude gestures, but I know there are some there are a lot of, nice ones that are not just, rude and things you can't say in front of your grandma. So
But it's important because well, people cannot see us right now, but the famous Italian gesture with the closed hand. That's it. People used to ask me, Gloria, come stai, while doing this gesture, and I was confused because, well, what are you asking me? How am I doing, or what the hell do I want?
Right.
They're two different things. If you do me this gesture and you ask, hey, how are you? I understand that you don't know how to use that gesture, but it's a bit confusing for someone who knows how that works.
Right. It's interesting because that goes to show like how the Italian gesture has kind of become, I don't want to say a stereotype, but I think it's easy for people who are outside of Italy and don't understand it, for them to think that they can just insert a gesture anywhere to indicate they're speaking Italian or they're making an effort to speak Italian, but there's a nuance there.
And it comes in handy when you are in a crowded place. Well, now we are recording in the COVID time, so no crowded places for now. But if you are in a noisy and crowded place and you need to get your message through, a gesture is much more effective than a word.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. I got to do a whole other episode on Italian gestures, I think. I think that could be fun. It'll have to be a video episode so we can see all the gestures. So, for anyone who, as I said, Italian culture is known all around the world, but I think a lot of Italian culture is also like, um how do I say this? It's like, from what I experience outside of Italy versus what I experience in Italy is very different. Like the way that the culture is translated throughout the world, through food, through gestures, through beverages and things like that. But I want to know, in the country of Italy, for anyone who hasn't been to Italy, um, is planning on going sometime, or wants to experience it from the comfort of their apartment, their home, as we are in quarantine. I want to ask you a couple of questions, and maybe you have answers, maybe you don't, and if you don't, it's totally fine. But um, how could someone experience the language and the culture through music? A popular musician, an instrument, or a song?
Okay, I would go with Mina.
Oh, I
I
love.
don't know. Yeah, I don't know if she's famous in the US, but she's Mina, and she's an iconic figure in Italy. An amazing singer, amazing.
I'm a fan. I'm a
Oh wow!
Nina. I think her music is a lot of fun. Um, How about a cuisine, a food or a dish that's really popular that you equate with Italy?
I won't go for pizza, I'll go for caprese salad, which is mozzarella, basil, and tomato, which, by the way, represent the Italian flag colors.
How about a beverage, a cocktail, a beer, a spirit, or a soft drink that you equate with Italy?
I go with limoncello, but I don't drink alcohol. I
Mm.
just know it's really popular and, well, famous even in Spain.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's really popular. Can I tell you what my soft drink would be that like nobody understands how much I love this? Hard to find here. Kinoto.
Whoa! I don't drink in autumn, I'm afraid, but I understand you.
I love it, and I never had it before I visited Italy, and I tried it and I fell in love right away. And it's hard to find here in New York, but when I do find it, I buy as much of it as I can. Fit in the fridge. It's perfect. Well, I love
2 more bottles just in case.
you never know. How about a fruit?
Lemon, but from the southern regions.
Mm. What about them makes them very special?
The weather,
Mm-hmm.
it's pretty different to grow fruit here where I come from and growing it in the south where it's sunny
Mm-hmm.
and warm.
Yeah. How about a book? A novel, a short story, or an author, uh, or a story that's set in Italy, or an author that an Italian author.
I will go with Elena Ferrante.
Mm.
She became so popular. Well, it's a pseudonym. We don't know who she really is, but I know she got so famous and appreciated. I haven't read one of her books, but I appreciate how she spread some history and made, well, Italian culture appreciated worldwide.
A sport that's really big and really popular in Italy.
Football, we call it calcio.
Joe. Yeah.
I don't like it, but you ask me of a sport that's really big. It's calcio.
Well, Gloria, thank you so much for joining me and having this conversation. I
Thank
really
you.
enjoyed talking to you. And I like to end each episode with the same question. I like to start and end each episode with the same questions. Do you have any jokes, popular sayings, tongue twisters, cool slang words, idioms, words of wisdom, or words of advice in Italian to share?
Sure, I have one Italian proverb, which is chi non risica non rosica.
Mhm.
Chi non risica non rosica. It
Chi
means,
rosica non rosica?
yeah,
Mhm.
it's a Tuscan saying, and it means that if you don't take risks, you won't enjoy your results. So
Oh, I like that.
it's pretty straightforward,
Yeah.
and I love it as a philosophy as well.
Yeah, it's perfect. It's perfect. It's a good one for your students to live by too, I think. I think so. Well, thank you again so much. And thank you for sharing that proverb. Thank you for sharing that proverb with me, with all of us. And really quickly, in Italiano, what is the best way to say goodbye?
A presto,
A
ciao,
ciao,
e un abbraccio.
un abbraccio. Ciao, a presto, un abbraccio, Gloria. E grazie mille per questa conversazione. And I will be talking to you soon.
Grazie,
Ciao, bye.
ciao.